Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to round 3 coverage of my games from the 2018 Larry Evans Memorial. In round 3 I had the black pieces and I was facing an opponent rated 1716. My rating was 1803. In spite of the 2 losses the previous day, I was still feeling okay in terms of my chess playing ability. It's not like my brain had gotten foggy, but maybe I was lacking a certain discipline, not carrying the calculations out far enough. But I didn't feel like there was any fundamental impairment in my chess ability. So I had a decent night's sleep, and I was approaching the game with a positive attitude. Also, after a couple rounds in the Swiss tournaments, if you've had bad results, your opponents have also had bad results. So they're having a bad tournament too. So we're on equal footing from that point of view. Let's see, my opponent's rating for this game was 1716, and my rating for the tournament was 1803. He has the white pieces and starts off with e4. So I went ahead with c5, not afraid to play a sharp opening, not trying to stay out of trouble or anything. Let's see, he went knight f3, and I went d6. So I guess I wanted to say my attitude towards this tournament was, I'm obviously at the bottom of the A section. In a way, I'm just trying to figure out if I belong in the A section or the B section, but it seems that when I drop down into the B sections, I do pretty well, and then I end up back in the A section anyway, where I end up losing quite a number of games. So I guess I'm just on that cusp at the moment, the boundary between the 2 sections. But I did want to just play. That's why I signed up for all the games and didn't take any buys. I wanted to just play all the games and see how the results turned out and make my best effort and just use that as a test to try and figure out what section I really belong in. So I'm not avoiding the sharp openings. I'm just playing my normal stuff. Let's see. He played d4 here, going for the open Sicilian. So white is obviously sticking to his guns as well. Let's see, takes, and I play knight to f6. So the idea is to put pressure on that e-pawn and encourage this knight to come out to c3, and that prevents the Maroczy bind. And then I play knight to c6 here. This is known as the classical variation. And he moved the knight back to b3, which is interesting. It's not the most common response there at all, although it's not a bad move. Maybe it's not the sharpest continuation. The most popular lines are either bishop to g5, putting pressure on this knight right away. There's also bishop to c4 coming out and looking at this diagonal. It's a strong piece on c4, also stopping me from any potential d5 push. Or bishop e2, which is considered more of a positional variation, but it keeps control of this diagonal, and that's also a pretty sound way to play as well. Bishop e2 has the idea of castling kingside. Yeah, bishop c4, if you castle kingside after that, that's the Fischer-Sozin attack. Also an interesting way to play, although I think the main move is still bishop g5. At least that was the most popular move in the opening book. You can go for something like a English attack setup here too, if you want, with f3 and bishop to e3. Lots of things are possible. Knight to b3, like I said, not a bad move, but maybe not the most aggressive choice from white. And so that tempted me to play g6. I don't play the Sicilian dragon that much because the direct lines against the Sicilian dragon are pretty strong. The attacks are pretty easy to play for white. But in this case, it feels like I'm getting into a dragon setup, and white has kind of moved one of his pieces away from the center. So I felt safe enough playing this move. And I like the dragon setup, with the bishop here looking out at this diagonal, and the bishop, well, usually comes here looking out at this diagonal. With kind of minimal pawn moves, you get your pieces to very good squares. And so it's kind of setup that if you can get away with it, it seems to be pretty nice. So I go for it when I get the chance. I guess that's the point I'm making. Let's see. He went bishop e2 now, taking control of the g4 square there. I go bishop g7, and he goes bishop g5 at this point. My bishop is defended. My knight is defended by the bishop. I'll probably take back with the bishop if he exchanges here. So I just castle. And notice that I haven't played the e-pawn forward in this line. So it's not blocking this bishop and also there's no pin on this diagonal. This knight is still free to move. So that's one of the points of this setup. Let's see, he went queen d2, so he's preparing to castle queenside. I went a6. a6 maybe is a little bit of a wasted move, and technically this is the last move in the book, but actually we're in kind of a rare sideline at this point, so not that many games to choose from. I mean, it still seems to be okay from the chess engine point of view, but I was playing a6 with the intent of playing b5, and then later I didn't end up playing b5. So I have to question whether a6 was the right move here. I could have just developed the bishop. Bishop to e6, I think, was given by the chess engine as an interesting way to post that bishop looking out at the queen side. So if white could still castle in either direction, but if white castles queen side, maybe there's some possibility of messing up the pawns over there. So a6, maybe not the best move here. And he went right away on the king side with h4. So I guess in a way you could think of this as white had played one kind of slow move against this setup, and I had played one kind of slow move at a6, and we're pretty even. And the attack needs to be respected. I played h5, which is one of the ways to prevent white's pawn from coming to h5. If this pawn comes to h5, there's no way that I can stop white from opening up one of these lines. Either the h file or the g file is going to open up. He's got this bishop well posted, so if I take with the knight, he's not even sacrificing the exchange to open up that file. He can just take it with the bishop and then take with the rook. And in this case he would be castling queenside and bringing the other rook over. Looks like a pretty fast attack. So h5 is, I think, a sensible move here to kind of slow it down a bit. And now I've got this bishop, even though it's still back on c8, is looking out at these critical squares. This knight is also guarding the g4 square. And he didn't want to, at this point, trade his bishop for my knight, although that was certainly an option. Instead, he decided to play f3 here, with the idea of following up with g4. So we have this typical kind of setup. I am not going for a pawn storm over here so much as I am going for activity on the c file. So I want to move this bishop and get my rook over here to c8. But I started with this move knight e5. I mean, knight e5 is a typical move in these positions, and it's looking to come into the c4 square mostly. And but in this particular position, it's actually a mistake. So let's go back right here. This is where the chess engine is recommending bishop e6. So this is the line given by the chess engine, and it says is about equal. Say bishop e6. White chooses at this point to commit to queenside castling. I get my rook to c8. And later I have the idea of doing this knight e5 to c4 maneuver. And this seems to be about an equal position. So interesting and good play for both sides. So that's how I should have played this. Knight e5 is a bit premature. Notice that I played this move before I'd secured the c4 square. So there's no rook on c8. There's no pawn on b5. Those are ways, or even the bishop on e6. Those are all ways that that c4 square might be defended with the bishop, the rook, or the pawn. I haven't played any of those, and so right here at this very moment, white has an opportunity to play g4, and I thought I had pretty much prevented this. Let's see. Well, what he played wasn't bad. So let's show this g4 idea in a bit. He just castled queenside, which is good, and I continue with bishop d7. This was where I had decided against playing b5 because that had been part of my plan. And sometimes you want to push the pawns forward to weaken this the c file, push this pawn off of c3. But I was thinking that b5 and bishop to b7 would be dangerous because the bishop is doing a useful job over here on this light square diagonal. I didn't want to distract it from that. So that's why I changed my mind about this b-pawn push, and that also sort of puts a question mark to that a6 pawn move there. Anyway, so I went bishop d7, keeping the bishop on this diagonal. And here's the place where he had his chance to play g4. It might have worked in the previous situation as well. I just want to show the idea here. If I take it, he doesn't take back right away, but he throws in bishop takes knight here. I would probably take back with the pawn. I could take back with the bishop. Either one works, but I'd probably try to keep the pawn cover here. And then he still doesn't take back. He plays f4. And so he sacked a pawn here, but this knight doesn't have a good square to go to because I didn't prepare the c4 square for the knight to jump to. Now, if I had c4 in the mix already, then this would still be okay for me. You know, like if there was a rook here, so this knight could go there, I should still be okay. But here, this is pretty dangerous. The knight goes back to c6, for example. He can push on with h5, maybe sacking. Well, that's not a sack, because if I take, he will take back. And already this is looking like a dangerous attack for white. So that's how white should have played this, and that was the mistake I made. My first mistake in this game was it was really this early knight e5. Playing knight e5 before there's a landing spot prepared on c4 is risky, and that's an example of how white could have exploited it. So I think that's pretty handy for all you Sicilian players to remember that, because this knight e5 to c4 maneuver is used in a lot of different Sicilians, not just the dragon. Okay, but let's go on with the game. I went knight e5. He castled, which is still good. And then I went bishop d7. And then here, instead of playing g4, is kind of his best shot for that move, he played the move bishop to h6. So I thought for a long time after this move, I want to exchange off that bishop, but I don't want to drag his queen out, so I don't want to take it. I was considering the move king to h7 just to force him to take, or to retreat the bishop, and just kind of clarify the situation, because after the exchange, my king is going to be on g7. The rook can come over and help defend the h-file, and I'm feeling like things are pretty good. But I also want to get some counterplay going, so it was a tough decision for me. Eventually I decided to play the move rook to c8. King to h7 would have been a playable move, but after rook c8, he decided to take. And so I kind of saved myself a tempo by not forcing that exchange and just letting him play the exchange. And I got this rook c8 move in. Okay, and he went rook d to g1, setting up his obvious threats, now pushing the g-pawn forward. And now I come in with my counterplay over here on the queen side with knight c4. So he took. Actually, the chess engine points out that that move is okay. It likes the move rook to h8 right here even better. And that's a useful move also to keep in mind if you play the Sicilian. Get your king up here, bring the rook over, and then when the g-pawn comes forward, you can take it, and you're opening up the h-file for your rook instead of opening it up for your opponent's rook. Anyway, I went knight c4. This is still okay for me. He took, I took, and he went knight d5. So he decided against g4. g4 could have been tried here. I think this is a line. I would have taken. He could have pushed on with h5, and then I would have played rook h8 here. And this seems to hold. This seems to be okay. You know, maybe I'll round up a pawn, but it also seems to be okay for white. I mean, white has enough play by opening up those lines. So that would have been a reasonable way for both sides to play. Anyway, he decided not to go with that immediately, but throw in this move, knight d5. Sort of trying to get all his pieces active, but oh well, I mean, it is getting rid of this defensive piece around my king, so there is some point to it. You know, but I decided to trade it off, and after queen takes d5, I go queen c7. And at this point, I kind of feel the tide of the game is turning a little bit. I think it's been pretty even up to this point, you know, with threats on both sides. But now, you know, I'm starting to get active over here against the king, and his attack has been held at bay long enough for me to organize my my queenside play over here. And when that happens, usually the Sicilian player is in pretty good shape. And in fact, he has to retreat to come back and defend the c2 pawn. I thought he might have tried c3 there, but I was planning to kick his queen away anyway. I think that queen is going to run short of squares, so I think queen d2 is a reasonable defense here. And then I played the move f5. This was a bit controversial perhaps, but still seems to be okay. I mean, it's always dangerous to push pawns in front of your king when you're under attack. There's a rule against doing that. But at the same time, with these two pawns here, I really have clamped down on that g4 move. And if he exchanges to open things up, then, well, it brings my bishop to a good square and another piece coordinating on c2. Let's see, he played the move rook to e1, so he just came over to defend. The chess engine is saying actually best for white is to go ahead and take. And then there's a nice resource for white here. He can play knight to d4, defending c2 and kicking this bishop around. The chess engine also gives the line, you know, e5 kicking the knight and just forcing a trade, and it says it's about even. So this would still be an equal position. Instead, he went rook e1, and I think at this point I'm starting to get some kind of serious advantage because this rook, I've managed to maintain it on the c4 square. It's looking at the center, and this is going to become weak. I go ahead and take. He can take with the pawn immediately, or he can take with the rook first, but either way he ends up with an isolated e-pawn here. And then I find a nice move right here. So I think this is one of the good moves of the game. If you want to look at it, you can maybe think about this position and ask yourself how you would continue. It's not a tactical move. It's just what's the best move to kind of improve the position, activate your pieces, maybe create some threats, that kind of thing. Okay, yeah, pause the video if you want time to think about it. I'm giving the answer away now. I played the move queen to c4. And the chess engine does say this was the best move in the position, so I was kind of proud of myself for finding it. It does a number of things. Well, first of all, it's looking at these squares so that if this queen comes into check, I can trade it off. And this is a very good endgame for black. One thing about the Sicilian is that if you survive those attacks, you often have a good endgame because you have the better pawn structure. And that's the case here. Another idea of this queen c4 move is that the rook and the queen are coordinating on the f1 square. So it may be possible for me to check here and pick up the g-pawn. So anyway, and also it's looking at the center. So kind of three different ideas in one move, and it seems to be just holding the position together pretty well. He went ahead and went for the exchange. So the chess engine recommends some kind of strengthening move here. For example, g3. But in fact, white is already in trouble. The problem really started with his decision to try and defend the center with rook e1 and allowing this exchange in the weakened e-pawn. So white has been worse ever since then. So after g3, the rook can come into e3, f3 rather, hitting this pawn. And then the chess engine is recommending pushing the e-pawn forward, taking advantage of the pin here, and also just trying to create some complications, I think, because that sacrifices the g3 pawn, but it creates a position with some chances for white. A messier position, I guess. Anyway, he just went for the trade here. And so I took, and this is just a good position for me. In fact, after rook f4, I'm winning material because he can't defend both of those pawns. If he had managed to get that g3 move in, then this wouldn't have been possible. But in this particular position, the way it was, I'm picking up a pawn, and so I managed to keep this edge, at least. So I grabbed the pawn here. Let's see, he brings his king out. I think I'll go through the rest of the game fairly quickly. I went rook g4. I'm just, using my active pieces to go after his pawns. Notice the bishop is controlling these squares that his knight might like to hop into. So I have a lot of control over this position. So he plays rook e2 to defend. Go e5, kicking the knight. knight f3, and bishop c6. Yeah, this was an interesting moment in the endgame. I was thinking about the move, bishop to b5, and that's also a good move. I mean, the good part is that I was having trouble deciding between moves, and they were all good moves that I had to choose between. The bad part is that you have to still be careful not to use up all your time. Bishop b5, just to show this, if the rook wants to hold on to this pawn, then it gives up the other pawn. So that wins another pawn, and that's pretty strong. But I settled on this move, bishop to c6, thinking it was even stronger, because he played a move I thought he couldn't play. That was a little bit of a miscalculation on my part. I was thinking he couldn't play king to d3 because of the skewer here. But of course, if I play my bishop to b5 now to skewer, he can block with the pawn to c4. So there is no skewer there. So I was a little disappointed. But it turns out this is still a good position for me. Anyway, I'm not winning a pawn immediately, but I just start pushing the pawns forward on the king side here, and now he has to do something to try and stop these. He tried this maneuver with the knight back to d2. I push this pawn forward, and it brings his king to e3. Just bring his king over to help defend against the my majority of pawns over here. I did want to mention right here, instead of h4, the chess engine points out the move rook g3 is really strong. I didn't think of this idea, but it's got 2 points. One is, well, 3 points. One is if the knight comes back, then I can just pin and win the knight. So that's not playable. If the king moves, the king might go to this, could only, let's go after rook g3 check. The only square the king can go to is the c4 square. And now this skewer really does win the rook, so that's not playable. So really the only move here is rook e3, and then I can grab this pawn, and now these two pawns will be unopposed going down the board. So that would have been the fastest win there. So relying on that nice trick with rook g3 check. Okay, but I just pushed the pawns forward. This is also winning. Let's see, he went king e3. I went, and then I went d5. I wanted to activate the bishop along this diagonal. And he helped me out by taking. Actually, the chess engine recommends ignoring this and just moving the king over here to protect the pawn on g2. I would probably take at this point, and the pawn. It's my own. It's a case of my own pawns are blocking my bishop here. But well, I have ideas of pushing this pawn forward, just sacrificing it to open up the bishop on the g pawn. So I think this is still fine for me, but it's a little bit easier the way he played it, because he took here, and now you can see kind of the advantage of the bishop over the knight in the endgame when you have pawns on both sides of the board. The bishop is defending over here, it's attacking over here, it's keeping the knight under control. It's got all the forward moves of the knight are covered. So a nice position for the bishop versus the knight. He went back to f3. I can't. Oh yeah, the pinning trick doesn't work, and I had to decide what to do here. I decided the simplest thing to do was just to start to take some material off, but it has to be done a little bit carefully. I wanted to make sure I still got an easily winning endgame. So I went rook e4 check, which forces the exchange of rooks here, or allows me to force the exchange of rooks. So I can trade rooks, and then I played king to f6. So this is another move that I am proud of for the game, although other moves are winning here, so it's not necessarily the best move here. But I didn't like this. I just want to show you what I was considering. If I just keep taking, this is probably a winning king and pawn ending. Actually, it is. I know for certain it's a winning king and pawn ending. But it's a little bit harder to win than the one I got into. So now king f6. His king can come forward to g4 and set up this blockade. I'll have to sacrifice this e-pawn so that I can bring my king forward. But the way I played it, I moved my king forward first. And so in this position, let's see, he played Yeah, king takes e2. I went king f6 first. And now this is a simpler win. Now I'm, oops, let's go back to the game. Yeah, he just took, and I went king f6. And yeah, now this is a simpler win because after the trade I can bring my king forward. So he could move the knight away. He does have to worry about this pawn, so I guess he'd have to move the knight back here, and I still would bring my king forward and just march these pawns. He started trying to get counterplay over on the queen side with b3, and now I go for the king and pawn endgame. Bishop takes, king takes, because I can get my king to f5 and his king can't go anywhere. So let's just go through these moves. I play g4 to kick his king back, and then I bring my king, not there, bring my king forward. He pushed the pawn, and I just attacked it. The thing is, his king is stuck here. It's got to stay over here. Can't come forward, and it can't walk away because these pawns will queen. So it's just stuck. Let's see. I attack this pawn. He defends it. I attack this pawn. He defends it. I attack this pawn. And at that point, he resigned. The point is, any further pawn pushes just result in him losing all of these queenside pawns. So there's basically nothing he can do here. Anyway, it was a good game and a nice boost to my confidence, even though I was playing a weaker player. It was a win in a tough, from the black side of a Sicilian, so it's always a challenge. But well, these kind of positions are why I enjoy playing the Sicilian too. So it was a fun game. Anyway, that's it for round 3 coverage. Stay tuned for my coverage of round 4, and I will see you then.